But if you can't see, which I know you can't, you all can't see through me, so you may want to move over here. We're studying the book of Hebrews. We're still in chapter 11, and hopefully we'll get through chapter 11 today. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. You need to use a Bible. There's one right there on my bench. You can use it. It's Hebrews chapter 11 is where we are. Right now, verse 8, but we'll be moving from there to verse 9 and on. Verse 9 says, by faith he dwelt in the land of promise as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Paul's intent in this chapter is to demonstrate what faith does. We know that faith believes, but faith is more than just belief. Faith actually does something. It's a motivator. It's your motivation. And in a series of examples, he's going to make this very point. By faith, he dwelt. Abraham dwelt. He waited in the land of promise as in a foreign country. You remember, he'd left the Ur of the Chaldeans, went to Canaan land. And he didn't know anyone there. He was a stranger. No one really wanted anything to do with him. He could have went back home. I'd say most people probably would have went back home. But he chose not to. The Lord told him to stay there. And because he believed in the Lord that there was some reason behind his staying there, Abraham decided to stay there. And he did. Faith. He believed God. Therefore, he dwelt in the land of promise as in a foreign country. He dwelt in tents. Didn't have a house. He probably had a house in the Ur. Probably had a pretty good house in the Ur, and they were fairly well off. But he's living in tents now, and he's content to live that way. He's taken a major step down in his living accommodations. He dwelt in tents with his boys Isaac and Jacob, who were also heirs with him of the same promise. The reason being, he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. He believed there was heaven. He believed that he would have a home in heaven. And because he believed, he dwelt in the land of promise. He dwelt in tents. Not too good of a way to live, and he waited until the time would come until he could go and be with God in heaven. Faith is an action. It's not mere belief. That's not the kind of faith the Lord's looking for. Faith is a belief that is so strong it motivates a person to do what the Lord would have him to do. Faith is, we're saved by faith. We know the Bible teaches that. We're saved by grace, but it's through faith, we're told, distinctly. And that faith that we're talking about now is belief conjoined with works. And that's the way all the Greek lexicons define the word. Like we go to our Webster Dictionary to find out what a word means. The Greek lexicons, I've got several at home, but they all say the same thing. Faith is belief conjoined with works. It's not mere belief. And, you know, it's taught that way by many people today, which is incorrect. In Romans 10 and 17, Paul said, faith comes by hearing, hearing by the word of God. Where did he learn about heaven? Well, the Lord told him. The Lord told him one day he would have a home with him in heaven, obviously. He believed that. He waited for it. Somebody had to tell him. He'd never seen heaven. He didn't know what a heaven was. until the Lord told him that there was a heaven that awaited him for his faithfulness. His prospects didn't look too good. He left a decent place to live, and he went to the land of Canaan, where he was a foreigner to everybody there, and he had to live in a tent, and he had to live that way as he waited for heaven. He heard God's promise, and because he believed God would keep his word, he lived his life accordingly. That's what faith does. When you talk about faith, at least the faith that God's looking for, the faith that saves, the faith that Paul's talking about in Ephesians 2 and 8, when he said, by grace you are saved through faith. It's grace that saves us, and it's because of faith that God chooses to give us grace. Now he's going to have a whole list of them. By faith, Sarah herself also received strength to conceive seed, and she bore a child when she was past the age, because she judged God faithful who had promised. She was 89 years old when she conceived her last child, Isaac. At age 89, a lot of times people have different rooms or different beds or whatever. Childbearing days are over. Thoughts of such things have passed. But with Sarah, it hadn't passed at all, because God had made a promise that she would conceive a child. She believed God's promise, and she remained ready to conceive a child when the occasion arose. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, that's Abraham. He was 99 years old, but when Isaac was born, he was 100 years old. Him as good as dead were born as many as the stars of the sky, in multitude, innumerable as the sand which is in the seashore. When Isaac was born, what would come through him would be many, 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 many people, like the stars of the heaven, like the sand of the seashore. His seed would multiply immensely through the years, and they would become a great nation eventually. By the time they went into the land of Canaan, they were there were at least 2 million people that had come from Isaac, this one child. From him, by that time, there was 2 million, plus all that had lived and died in between. But, and then after that, of course, many, 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 many more. But this is what the author is alluding to. Therefore, from one man, Abraham, and him as good as dead, 100-year-old, was born as many people as the stars of the sky, in multitude, innumerable as the sea, the sand which is by the seashore. God made a promise. Abraham and Sarah believed God, and therefore they conceived and bore a child, and from that child came a mighty nation. These all died in faith. They all believed, but they never received the promise of heaven, of course. But having seen the promise from afar off, through the eye of faith, that's what we call it. You got an image of heaven in your mind because God told you there would be a heaven. You got an image of God in your mind, and you can see heaven, even though it's not visible. Having seen the promises of God afar off through the eye of faith, they were assured of them, they embraced them, and they confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. They knew they were here for a short time only. They know what you and I know. We're temporary. This is not meant to be permanent. It's a temporary existence. We live to give us an opportunity to choose to believe God or not, whichever we prefer to do. It's up to us. But because it is temporary, because one day testing is over and the test will be taken, they confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims, and they lived realizing their citizenship was yet to be had, and this would all pass away. For those who say such things, say includes saying it, literally saying it, but it also includes living that way. Those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. I'm a stranger and a pilgrim in this place. Home is yet to come. Home is where my family's at, on the other side. And that's where I'm looking to go. I'm looking to go home, where my citizenship is, where my people are, so that I can be with them again. I believe in the promise of God. Therefore, I conduct myself in such a way that one day I can have that promise also. Those who live that way declare plainly they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind the country from which they had come out, they would have had opportunity to return. And we do, because we have choice. We have personal volition. We do what we want to do. If we want to listen to God, we do. If we don't, we don't. It's up to us. If Abraham had decided to go back to the Ur, he could have done it. He just didn't do it. His belief in the promise of God was so strong that he wouldn't go back and live that way again. He waited for something better. And the same thing's true with every one of these people that we're going to read about. They all preferred what was ahead rather than what was behind. But now they desire a better country. That is a heavenly country. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. They have a place to go to, and that's what they longed for. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, whether or not he would believe God, God told him to offer up his only son, Isaac. Why? What was the purpose of it? At the last minute, God called it off. Why did he have to go through the exercise? He was being tested to see how much faith he had. Not for God's sake. God didn't have to test him to know how much faith he had. God tested him so that Abraham could know how much faith he had. He could realize how strong his belief in God was, and not only that, but he would become an example to everyone around him. By faith, when he was put to the test, he offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises offered up his only begotten son. All the promises Abraham looked forward to was going to come through Isaac. Well, if you kill Isaac, the promises can't come true. How could he possibly kill his only begotten son? How could he kill all the promises that he longed for? God told him to do it. I'm not saying I could have done it. I don't know that at all. But Abraham did. He offered up his son, of whom it was said, in Isaac your seed shall be called, like the sand of the seashore. It would have come to an end right then. Abraham concluded, this is why he went through and did it, in addition to believing God. He concluded that God was able to raise him back up. If he killed him, God would resurrect him. That's what Abraham thought, because the promises had to come through Isaac. It's the only child of promise there was. And Abraham thought in his mind, if I kill this boy, he's 13 years old, if I kill this boy, my posterity's gone. All my hopes are dashed, but being who he is, God can raise him back up to life, even from the dead, from which he also received him in a figurative sense, which he did. In Abraham's mind, that boy is as good as dead. So when God stopped him, or the angel stopped him, in a figurative sense, he did receive him back to life, because he was dead in his mind and heart, and then he got him back. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau. Why did you bless them two boys, Abraham? I believe God. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, he blessed each of the sons of Joseph and worshipped, leaning on the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the departure of the children of Israel from the land of Canaan from the land of Egypt back to Canaan. And he gave instruction concerning his bones. That is, Joseph told them that when God calls you to go back to Canaan, I want you to dig up my bones and take them with you and bury them there in the land of Canaan. Why did he say such a thing? He believed God and his promises. Faith, by faith they did this. By faith they did that. By faith they didn't just sit down. By faith they did something. And because of belief, conjoined with works, the belief motivated them to do something. They had faith, and God blessed them. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden 3 months by his parents. Here we're not talking about the faith of Moses, we're talking about the faith of his parents. They were told that Moses had to die when he was born. All the male children had to die when they were born. And they defied the order of the Pharaoh of Egypt. And instead they hid Moses. Why? Because they saw he was a beautiful child. Because they saw that he was special. He wasn't an ordinary child. He was an ordained child, if you will. How did they see it? I have no idea. But there was something in Moses, something they could recognize, that Moses wasn't an ordinary kid. God would have a special work for him, which he did. And because they believed God was going to have this child do something special for him, they hid Moses from Pharaoh's baby slayers, and they were not afraid of the king's command. By faith, Moses, when he became of age, he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Man, Moses was the prince of Egypt. That dude had it made. He was about the third most powerful man on the earth. He had money. He had the coolest chariots. He had lowrider chariots. Whatever he wanted, he could have it. I mean, he was stinking rich. And he just gave it up. He refused to hold that position. Why? Well, he chose instead to suffer affliction with the people of God rather than enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. Our author doesn't disavow that there are pleasures to sin. Sometimes I've heard people say there aren't any pleasures to sin, but that's not true. People want to sin because it's pleasurable. People commit adultery because it's pleasurable. You know, it's not because they have to, it's because they want to. There's pleasure to be found. The same thing, people look for pleasure and they drink alcohol or use drugs or whatever. They find pleasure in it, at least for a little while, but usually it comes back around to bite you, and the pleasure's gone. Get caught committing adultery and you lose everything you had. Your kids are taken away from you. Everything's gone. You lost your spouse. The same thing with alcohol or drugs. Many a life has been ruined with alcohol. We used to see it a whole lot more than you do now, I think. But at least I did. But drugs, I forgot how many young people are dying every year because of these drugs. And sometimes, they think they're getting a hold of good drugs. I don't mean that way. Drugs that are not necessary to get you high, but a lot of times in college where kids are taxed from so much studying, they take certain pills to stay awake, to keep functioning. And now, the Chinese are mixing fentanyl with them drugs. And because these kids are taking those pills, they're loaded with fentanyl, they take one pill and they die. A lot of kids dying that way. And it's just a horrible thing. Anyway, it seems good at first, but it'll come around and bite you. It'll come around and bite you. In that sense, the pleasure's not there. But don't deny the pleasure. That's why our body wants to do it. Anyway, back to Moses. He chose to suffer, being a man on the run, rather than enjoy the passing pleasures of sin as the third most powerful man in the world. Why? He esteemed the reproach of Christ, the reproach he suffered because of God, greater riches than all the treasures in Egypt, for he looked to God's reward. And he thought that the reward of God was greater than the reward of Egypt. And it was. The reward of Egypt would be short-lived at best, and the reward of God is forever and ever. Not really a contest there when you stop and think about it, if you believe it. If you don't believe it, of course, it's hard. Forever and ever with God means nothing if you don't believe it. But if you do believe it, do you really want to give that up for anything in the world? No, that doesn't work that way. By faith, Moses he forsook Egypt, he left it. Not fearing the wrath of the king, he endured as seeing him who is invisible. His faith in God was so strong that he headed out on a mission that would ultimately result in his serving God. Not that he knew what he was going to do, but he knew that God would lead him to do whatever it was he wanted him to do. And he left Egypt. He was like Abraham. He was a man of very deep faith. By faith, Moses kept the Passover that the Lord told him to keep, and the sprinkling of blood, lest he who destroyed the firstborn should touch them. They put the blood on the lintels of the doorposts, because God said, if you've seen the blood on the doorposts, when the messenger of death passed over Egypt, he would spare the houses. The firstborn wouldn't have to die in the houses that had that blood. And the Israelites believed. Moses believed. The Israelites believed, probably Moses mostly. And then, by extension, God. And because of that, they were spared. By faith, they passed through the Red Sea. Man, that had to be a day. I tried to imagine in my mind what that was like. They were standing there on the banks of the Red Sea. The sea was at flood stage. It was that time of year. And the water was stopped. And of course, if the water stopped, you got all that water running down the river. If the water stopped, it's going to start mounting up higher and higher and higher and higher. And the same thing happened on the lower side of the river. And of course, you would think the ground underneath all that water would be muddy, so muddy you wouldn't be able to walk across it. But the Israelites had to walk across it. The sea was parted. They don't tell us how much, Moses didn't, but it had to be really, 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 really wide. Some experts say might have been a mile wide, that dry land, and a couple million Israelites had to cross over to the other side, and they did it. All that water is up over their head. You think that water's going to come crashing down on you, and they walked across it. Why? They had faith. Faith does something. It's not mere belief. Faith does. Don't ever doubt that. I know many preachers today. They talk about faith as being static. It's not. It's not static at all. Faith is very active, because a person believes, they act. That's faith. Whereas the Egyptians, when they attempted to pass the Red Sea, they were all drowned. They found artifacts down there of chariot wheels and things like that at the point where they believed the crossing was. Well, it must have been there, because that's where they found all this stuff in their excavations. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after. That's important too. Remember, they walked around the city of Jericho 7 times, and the city just stood there like a big dumb thing. They were hoping that the walls would fall down and they could go in and conquer the city. And they walked around 1 day, 2 day, 3 day. God had promised them, if you walk around the city, I'll make the walls fall down. Well, he did. After they did what he told them to do. Think about that. The promise wasn't fulfilled till they did what they were told to do. We talk about baptism, for example, as being essential to salvation. That a person must be immersed in water for the forgiveness of sins by the authority of Jesus Christ in order to receive forgiveness of sin. In other words, the reward of forgiveness of sins comes after that particular act, not before. You can't believe and pray to God and be saved. The Bible doesn't teach that. You can't believe and lay your hands on the television and be saved. No one is saved by faith alone, even though it's the most popular doctrine in the Protestant religion. It's just not true. Like the Israelites of old, the reward came after they did what God wanted them to do. And when you look at all of these examples, you'll notice that it's the same in every case. In every case, the promise came after the reward. God gave promise to Abraham that he would have a child. He did that when he was 70 years old. Abraham turned 71, no child. 72, no child. Count off to 25 years, no child. And then finally, at the age of 100, way past the age of firebearing, he had a son. After he demonstrated his faith, his belief, came the reward. You've got to listen to God. And sometimes people don't want to. And it's sad. By faith, the harlot Rahab, she didn't perish with all the other pagans who did not believe when she had received the spies with peace. It was because she received the spies and hid them that Rahab was spared from the wrath of God. James says what the Hebrews author is trying to teach us in chapter 11. Do you see that faith was working together with works, and by works, faith was made perfect? His point is you can't separate the two. They go hand in hand. Because belief motivates. That's what belief does. I believe, therefore, Paul said, I speak. It was because of his faith in God. That brings us to section 3, faithful people of the Old Covenant men and women. There's so many, I'm just going to pretty much go through them quickly. And what more shall I say? These are all examples of the same thing. We can go back, I don't want to do that in this class, but we can go back and check all of them, and you're going to find out it's the same in every case. For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah, also of David and Samuel and the prophets. These all, by faith, did something. Who through faith, this is what they did. They subdued kingdoms. They worked righteousness. Working righteousness. That's doing what's right. Doing what God would have you do. That's working righteousness. A righteous person is simply a person who does what's right. And God defines what is right. So anybody who is a righteous person is a person who is living by faith. Through faith, they subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, they obtained God's promises, and they stopped the mouths of lions. They quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword. Out of weakness were made strong, became valiant in battle, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. It was all through faith. Women received their dead, raised to life again. Several examples of that in the Old Testament. Others, they were tortured, not accepting deliverance. They could have accepted deliverance. I know more about the Christian era. If a body would just deny the Christ, their life would be spared. And most did deny the Christ. But there were some who did not. They would die before they would deny Christ. And this is who he's alluding to. Of course, this has been this way all the way back to Moses and farther. They were tortured, not accepting deliverance, because they believed there would be a better resurrection, and they would be participants of it. They believed in God's promise of heaven. Still others had trial of mockings and scourgings, yes, and of chains and imprisonment. They were stoned. They were sawn in two. I guess it is a rumor, though. Rumor is that Isaiah was sawn in two. They were tempted. They were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute. Comes to mind John the Baptizer. They were afflicted. They were tormented, of whom the world was not worthy of their presence. The world tortured them, persecuted them, murdered them. And the Lord says, the world that killed them wasn't worthy to be in the same presence as the people whom they killed. They wandered about in deserts, mountains, and dens, and caves of the earth. They refused to accept deliverance. I thought you was going to tell me to stop. I forgot what I was talking about. He got me that time. When you go back historically, one of the things you see is that these are, well, they're the cream of the crop, really. But even though they were such godly people, they suffered, and many of them died. Even the most popular ones in the Old Testament scriptures, they lived hard lives, and many in the end, they were murdered. It's one thing, sometimes you say, well, why me? And I think about these people sometimes, and I think, well, why not me? What makes me better than Isaiah? Or what makes me better than Jeremiah? What makes me better than Jesus Christ? Why is it okay for all them people to suffer, but not me? And then I get ashamed of myself. And I think, well, why not me? I'm no better than they were. Sometimes knowing these things can be good for our attitude. It's good attitude adjustment. Any questions? Well, let's move on. A superior light and privileges of the New Covenant, the New Testament. All these, having obtained a good testimony through their faith, did not receive the promise. They lived their whole life and never received the promise. They lived through faith, but they didn't receive what they were looking for. God, having provided something better for us, Christians, that they should be made perfect, should not be made perfect apart from us. In other words, everybody received a reward at the same time. When Christ died, his blood was shed, an offer of atonement was given to the Father. And because Jesus paid the price of sin, those who turned to God and asked for forgiveness could receive sin from that time forward. Well, at the same time, all those notable worthies of the Old Testament, all the righteous people throughout, all the way back to Adam, they too would be cleaned of their sins by the same blood that we're cleaned from. In other words, when Christ died, figuratively speaking, the blood went backwards and the blood went forward to the end of time, and whoever worked righteousness is cleansed at the same time. That's why they didn't receive the promise, because Jesus had to die for our sins before that promise could be delivered. I think I got to quit, so I'll do that. Goodbye. Goodbye, Bella. I'll see you later, baby. You awake or you sleeping? I can't tell. Move or something. Throw a songbook at me, honey. Boy, you're mean.